It was just listening to a lecture, right? Remember, you just needed to listen to a lecture. Can you give me a second, please? Okay, guys, sorry. So in question 4 of the speaking section, you will hear a lecture, a university lecture, and what you have to do is summarize that lecture. And in the lecture, remember, you will always have the topic broken down into 2 different subtopics. So you get 2 subtopics and 2 examples, right? And you already have the template. But in any case, I'm going to show it to you guys. But before we start practicing, I wanted to share with you guys the access to this platform here. It's called Magoosh. Does anyone know Magoosh? No, you've never heard of Magoosh? So I'm sending you guys the username and password for this platform to our WhatsApp chat. You should have already received it. Basically, in this platform, I'm gonna log in with the email. This is the email that we're gonna use. And the password is the one that I sent to the WhatsApp chat. I'm writing it down now as well. It's executive mayúscula and 2 exclamation marks. So if you guys go to this website and you log in using those credentials, then this is what you will have, okay? This is the platform that you guys will have access to in order to practice. So I just wanted to show it to you guys. This is the dashboard, the main page. So as you can see, you can practice every section that you want. But before we take a look at the part of practicing, I wanted to also show you the lessons available that you have here. So you have a lot of lessons that you can also take. These are pre-recorded videos of all the lessons related to the TOEFL exam. So on the left, you have everything related to the TOEFL test, the TOEFL skills that you need, an overview of the test, the updated format of the TOEFL new shorter exam, how the TOEFL is scored, the reading, listening, speaking, writing, everything that you need. And then you have specific lessons for each section, for the listening, for the speaking, the writing, for all of them. And on the right side, you guys have the grammar that you're gonna need for the TOEFL test. So if you guys are struggling with any of these grammar lessons or grammar points, you can always go here and check them out. You have grammar like parts of speech, basic sentences, punctuation, conjunctions, complex sentences, verb tenses, the infinitive, modal verbs, and so forth. So this is really helpful for those of you who want to go beyond our lessons and maybe take something else. If you want to review grammar, this is also going to be very useful to you guys. And this is all related to the lessons. If you go to one lesson, for example, let's go to this one here. It's a video, right? You can take your notes, you can save your entry, and you have the transcript here as well. Okay, guys? Any questions about this, about the lessons part? So if you go here to practice, this is probably the most important and most useful tool. You guys can select how you're going to practice. If you want to complete a simulation test, that means that if you want to do the entire test all at once, you can go to practice test, and that's going to give you a simulation of the test. But if you want to practice the one section separately, you can go to custom practice, and that way you can practice whatever you want. You can choose the section, reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So for example, right now we're in the speaking section, right? You can go to the speaking. You can select which task, which question you want to practice. So for example, right now we're practicing question 4, so we can click on 4. This question pool should always be in answered and unanswered. because you guys, I mean, all of you are going to use the same platform, so you are going to be answering some questions that maybe other people didn't answer yet. So make sure that it's in answered in an answer, and you can decide how many tasks you want, the time limit, and you can also choose to practice in the practice mode, where you will get explanations after each question, or in quiz mode, where you will get the explanations only at the end. So check it out. I'm sending you guys the link. I will also send it to the WhatsApp chat, but I also already sent you guys the credentials. So you can log in the platform and you'll have access to this. You can practice anytime, anywhere. So it's a really very useful tool. Okay, guys? So is this okay? Do you guys have any questions about Makush? All clear? Okay, guys, perfect. So if you guys don't have any questions, then we're going to start practicing. We're going to be doing question 4. In case you don't have the template, I'm going to show it to you guys again, because I'm going to need you to use this template at least for today's practice. Okay, I will need all of you to use the template. You can use something else. So let me show you the template again.
Oh, Miss, one question. You already sent us the link of that template? Or how can I get that template?
It's in the presentation. I sent you guys the link for the presentation. I'm gonna send it to you guys again.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yes, of course. And this presentation is for the entire speaking section. So I'm sending it to you guys again. Okay, this is a template, right? Slide 105. So in case you guys don't have the template right now, then please screenshot this. This is the template. You will have to use it for today's session. Okay, so make sure that you have this. Is it done? Okay, guys. So remember yesterday I was telling you a little bit about the topics that you have in this question. Does anyone remember what the 3 most common topics were? Most common subjects?
Business.
Business was one, great.
Psychology.
Psychology and business, psychology and biology, right? Yesterday we did one that was about business. Now let's start with psychology. Okay, guys? So I'm going to play the lecture. Please get ready to take notes and you guys will do it. So hang on. Okay, guys.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
When people are in difficult situations, sometimes they experience feelings of helplessness or psychological pain. So what do? They unconsciously use strategies called defense mechanisms to protect themselves psychologically from their painful emotions. Let's say a woman has a pet dog. She's had this dog for a long time, and he's kept her company and guarded her for years, but one day he runs away. This woman looks everywhere and asks other people if they've seen her dog, but she just can't find him. Now, she feels helpless and sad because she misses her dog, so she'll unconsciously find ways to deal with her painful feelings. One defense mechanism she might use is fantasy. With fantasy, the woman uses her imagination. So instead of just feeling helpless and sad about her lost dog, she invents a happy story in her mind. She might imagine that a nice family found him and feeds him, and that he's really happy with them. She'll picture the dog playing, running around, having fun. Because of this fantasy, she doesn't have to feel sad about her dog running away. It's a fantasy. It's not real, but it keeps her pain away. Another defense mechanism she might use is what we call sublimation. Sublimation is different from fantasy because sublimation isn't about pretending. It's about turning negative emotions into something useful, practical. So the woman might start a dog training school. That way, by training dogs, perhaps she can help prevent other people's dogs from running away like hers did. In other words, with sublimation as a defense mechanism, the woman redirects her negative feelings about losing her dog into a positive, constructive activity.
You guys? Now the question says, using points and examples from the talk, describe the two defense mechanisms mentioned by the professor. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, so who wants to go first? Anyone? Maybe we can start with Maria Rene. Could you go first, Maria Rene?
I'm not sure. Yeah, Miss.
Sorry?
Miss. I'm not sure yet. I can. The second.
Okay, yes, you can go next. So Pamela, what about you? Do you want to try?
Okay. The lecture discussed the two defense mechanisms to when you are in a difficult situation. And the first one is fantasy. This is when you use the imagination to invent a history in your mind. And for example, if you have a dog and he runs away, you can imagine the picture of your dog playing, and this is not real, but helps to this psychological pain. Then the professor talks about the second one is sublimation. And this is not about inventing, it's about turn the bad thinkings and make it good ones. For example, if your dog runs away, you can be a dog trainer and direct these negative thinkings in good ones.
Okay, great, perfect. Really, that was a great, well, I mean, that was a great first try. And I think it was amazing, to be honest. Really well done. Some
Great.
comments that I could make. First, before your introduction, remember to conjugate the verb discuss, right? So the lecture discusses two defense mechanisms. But I love your introduction, the fact that it was short, it was concise. And then the content was great. You mentioned both subtopics, sublimation and fantasy. Their definitions were correct. And you mentioned the examples as well. So I have no comments on the terms in the terms of the content. Maybe what I would say is don't forget to use a template, use transitions, at least for the beginning, right? Instead of telling me the first one is, tell me first, the professor explains fantasy, which is that you use a template. And second, and very importantly, try not to generalize the examples. In the example, when you mention the examples, make sure that you don't turn it into a different example. Like in this case, the professor talked about a woman that has lost her dog, right? She gave that example. So the way that you should summarize it is by saying something like, the professor gave the example of a woman who's lost her dog. Professor says that she might imagine that the dog is happy with a nice family in order to. So don't generalize it and turn it into a general idea. If you have a dog and it runs away, then you can imagine. Talk about that woman that the professor mentioned. Okay, just that for accuracy. But overall, it was great. Well done, Pamela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, do you have any questions so far? All right. Then let's do another one. Let's do biology now. Okay.
Listen to part of a lecture in a marine biology class.
A lot of plants and animals live near the surface of the ocean, and that means there's a lot of food near the surface because there are lots of plants and animals to eat. But if you go down to the deepest parts of the ocean, it's cold and dark, and there's not a lot living down there, so food is very scarce. So organisms that live down at these great depths have developed special adaptations to help them survive in this environment where food is so hard to find. For example, many deep-sea organisms have body features that enable them to eat prey that are larger than themselves. A good example, there's a species of eel that has an enormous mouth and a large stomach that's capable of expanding. And these unusual features allow this eel to eat prey larger than itself. That's a big advantage, because if the eel eats something big, that's a lot of food, a lot of nutrition. So the eel can go for quite a while before it has to find food again. Another helpful adaptation in some deep-sea organisms is the ability to generate light. And some organisms use that light to help them capture food. For example, there's a kind of fish called the anglerfish, and on its head, this fish has a little structure that produces light, that glows in the dark. This little structure, this little light, is positioned close to the fish's mouth. Other fish are attracted to this light. They think it's something small they can eat, so they swim straight toward it, and that brings them close enough for the anglerfish to capture them and eat them.
Right? Now the question says, using the examples of the eel and anglerfish, explain two types of adaptations that help animals survive in the deepest parts of the ocean. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So please, Luis, do you think you can go now?
The subtopic 2, I didn't write. Where we have
Don't worry about it. If you didn't catch the second subtopic, no problem. Try to hide it. For example, you could say, then she goes on to explain the second adaptation. And then you go directly to the example if you caught the example, right? It was the anglerfish as you have in the question. Maybe you can try to hide it like that. If you remember what the example was about, you can explain that. And if not, focus more on the first. Okay,
okay.
okay, go ahead, please.
The lecture discusses the two types of adaptation that help animals to survive in the deepest part of the ocean. First, the professor explains the body pictures, which is the ability to expand his stomach and could eat big animals. Then he goes on to explain the other ability to capture food, and he mentioned angler fish. And that's all.
Okay, great. Well done. So I like how you hide and how you went with the second reason. You guys need to do something like that. In case you didn't catch one part, it's okay. The goal is not to not say anything, right? And leave it in blank. You need to say something because at the end of the day, remember that the way they will evaluate your response is content for one, delivery for second, and also language use. So if you can't do well on content, then you still have delivery and language use to help you, right? So it's better to say something and to show that you can deliver your response well, and you have good, you make a good use of the language. So the way you did it was great. Then she goes on to explain the second adaptation that helps animals catch food in the ocean. And the professor gives the anglerfish as an example. That's it, right? I didn't really say anything about what the second adaptation was. I didn't explain, but I said something that was correctly articulated, that had good grammar, and that will count for something, right? And you can go maybe with a short conclusion if you still have time. You can say, in summary, these are the two adaptations that the professor talks about, giving these two examples of the eel and their anglerfish. So those are things that anybody can do, right? Because you have it in the question. Now, what I could say, Luis, well, first thing, practice your listening. You can see, maybe try to see what it is that is holding you back. Is it the vocabulary, the speed? So you can work on that. But then some other things I could say, don't forget to mention the examples. Your first subtopic was great, right? Body features. So for example, the ability to expand or have a large stomach in order to store a lot of food. But you forgot to mention the example of the eel, right? That's here in the question. So tell me, the professor gives the example of the eel, which is a type of fish that can eat larger prey than themselves, right? And that allows them to save a lot of energy. So don't forget the examples, and careful also with the pronouns of the professor. I think you got confused somewhere there. So make sure that you're always looking at your notes and you have it in big letters, right? So that you don't forget. But other than that, it was good. And I like the way that you did the second, the way that you improvised the second. So thank you, Luis. Is this okay so far? Do you guys have any questions?
And what happened if I can hear a specific vocabulary? For example, here the L and the anglerfish. I don't know if it is always be in the question, or what can I do if I didn't remember?
Okay, so I think the key is to know the structure. You should know that whenever you have biology, it's always for this question going to be like this. That means that it could be about animals, plants. So you should be paying attention, and you should know that you will always have two names of animals or two names of plants in the example. So your job is to try to hear at least how they are pronounced, so you can say something similar. It is very likely that you have the names of the examples in the question, because those are like technical words that you probably don't know. Nobody like would know unless you know about. So you could have them in the question, but if not, you should be paying attention for these words in biology. And in any case, if you didn't hear the name of the animal, let's say, then you could still do something to improvise, you know? So for example, you could say the professor gives the example of one type of fish to illustrate this idea of how some fish have big stomachs, for example. Even though you're not mentioning the specific name of the animal, you are acknowledging that there was an example, right? So those
Okay.
are some ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Miss, one question. It's supposed that the instructions of what we should do will appear next to the audio, or not?
I mean, you will have a narrator for the entire exam. So that person that says, listen to part of a lecture in a biology topic. And then they will tell you, you hear the lecture, and then they will read the question for you. Using the examples of the eel and anglerfish, that will be the narrator. And then you will also hear, you can begin preparing your response after the beep. You hear the beep, you have your 20 seconds to prepare. And then you will again hear, you can begin speaking after the beep. Beep, and then you need to start speaking. So then there's always going to be a narrator throughout the entire test reading the instructions for you. So you can hear them, but I don't know, I don't think you can see them. So it's just hearing the instructions.
Ah, okay. But the instructions goes next from the audio, or before?
Before the audio.
Before the audio. Okay. Because I can read the for example the instruction that says using the examples of the eel and anglerfish, and I was
No.
I was losing the name, the word of the eel, and I was thinking what it was the word. So it's very helpful to know that it's before the audio.
These instructions are not before the audio, actually. I mean, you will have some instructions before the audio, but this is the question, and you won't have the question before. It comes after the audio file.
Ah, okay. Ah, okay. No,
The
I get it.
instructions that you get before is just listen. Well, first you get the total instructions, which is going to be like, for this question, you will hear a lecture in an academic topic. After you hear the lecture, you will have 20 seconds to prepare, 60 seconds to speak. That's what you will hear first. And then they will say, now listen to part of a lecture. They play the lecture, then you get the question.
Ah, okay. Thanks, Miss.
Yes. So yeah, it would be great if you could see the question before, right? So you would be paying attention for specific things, but unfortunately we can't. Any other question? Okay, guys. So let's do another one. See, we've done psychology, biology, and business now, right? So let's try to do something different, something that's not one of those three, to also practice that. Okay. All right, let's do this one here. So pay attention, please.
Listen to a part of a lecture from a history class. The professor is talking about the Industrial Revolution.
Back in the 18th century, in a time known as the Industrial Revolution, some countries, well, England in particular, started using new technology, like steam-powered machines, to produce goods. And the use of these machines brought about some significant changes. Let's go over two main changes that occurred. One change was that the center of production moved from homes to factories. Let's take fabric or cloth as an example. Historically, for a very long time, people had made cloth by hand in their homes, earning a little money from their home-based cloth production. But then these new steam-powered machines for weaving cloth were invented and placed in factories, and these machines could weave cloth much more quickly and efficiently. So there wasn't any reason to keep making cloth slowly in homes when it could be made faster on factory machines. Thus, the majority of cloth production shifted from home-based businesses to factory production. Another result of the new technology is that cities started forming around factories. Like, let's say there was a cloth factory that was built in a certain small village. Now, of course, the factory needed workers to operate the machines used in cloth production. So the factory would hire a lot of rural workers who would then move from the countryside to the village. So instead of being spread out all over the countryside, the workers started to congregate in the village with the factory. As a result, the village got bigger and bigger and eventually grew into a city.
Now, using points and examples from the talk, describe two changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So maybe Rosario?
Okay, I'm not really sure about the first example, but okay, I can try. The lecture discusses about how industrial revolution affects in some example that it's England, and to what was the new technology affects to the new machines. And first, the lecture says about the ascension of the handmade things. For example, there was some clocks that was made in only hands made, but then the machines could make the clock in more efficiency, more faster, and it was really good in that part. And then the cities around the factories, I'm not really sure what I heard, but I understand it. It's like grew into a city, and then the cities was around the factories. Yes, I hear something like that.
Okay, good. So not bad. I mean, content was not bad, but I mean, we could improve. We could work mainly on structure.
Mhm.
Some comments I could give you. First of all, for your introduction, try not to remember what we said yesterday. When you're listening to the introduction from the lecture, you don't take any notes. You just pay attention to try to see what the topic is. And what you do in your introduction is say, the lecture discusses, you don't say about, the lecture discusses, and then you basically read what you have in the question. The lecture discusses two changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods, because that is the topic, right? Or you could say two changes brought by the Industrial Revolution as well. But if you just say this, it's okay. And that way you will save a lot of time. This should be 10 seconds. And then you have to focus on the two changes. So yes, it is important for everybody that you guys hear like the exact words that the professor uses for the two subtopics, because those are things that you normally can change. In this case, the first subtopic was the center of production moved from homes to factories. So products were not produced at homes anymore, they were produced in factories, as you said, but maybe you just needed the right vocabulary to explain that. So it's important that attention, you hear that. And the example was good. The clothes that were made by hand at homes when they were then or moved then to factories. And your second subtopic was also good. Cities started to form around factories, right? Because they needed workers. And the same example of a clothing factory. So it's just that you maybe work on your listening and the structure, don't forget to use a template. Instead of saying the second change was, tell me, then the professor goes on to explain the second change, which was how cities started to form around factories. So use a template, save time in your introduction, and careful when you're listening to the subtopics.
Okay, thanks, Miss.
Okay, sure. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay. So let's do something else. Okay. So I'm going to play the lecture.
Why do we do the things we do? What drives us to participate in certain activities, to buy a certain car, or even to choose a certain career? In other words, what motivates us to do what we do? Well, in studies of motivation, psychologists distinguish between two very different types. Our reasons for doing something, our motivations, can be extrinsic. In other words, based on some kind of external reward, like praise or money. Or they can be intrinsic, meaning we engage in the activity because it pleases us internally. Both create strong forces that lead us to behave in certain ways. However, intrinsic motivation is generally considered to be more long-lasting than the other. As I said, extrinsic motivation is external. It's the desire to behave in a certain way in order to obtain some kind of external reward. A child, for example, who regularly does small jobs around the house, does them not because she enjoys taking out the garbage or doing the dishes, but because she knows if she does these things, she'll be given a small amount of money for doing them. But how motivated would the child be to continue doing the work if her parents suddenly stopped giving her money for it? With intrinsic or internal motivation, we want to do something because we enjoy it or get a sense of accomplishment from it. Most people who are internally motivated get pleasure from the activity, so they just feel good about doing it. For example, I go to the gym several times a week. I don't go because I'm training for a marathon or anything. I just enjoy it. I have more energy after I exercise, and I know it's good for my health, so it makes me feel good about myself. And that's what's kept me going there for the past 5 years.
Okay. Now, using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of motivation. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, so Maria Reina, please. Do you think you can try this one? Maria Reina?
Okay, Miss, I try.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Well, the lecture discussed two types of motivation. First, the professor explained intrinsic motivation, and to illustrate, she gives the example of a woman who was to the gym because she enjoyed it and feel good with this activity. And second, the professor explains expressing motivation. And in this case, I'm not sure, Miss, to topic. Just I understand well one topic.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. So, and I actually forgot to say this just because I wanted to say before as well. If you guys don't know something, don't ever say that you're not sure, that you don't know in the response, right? You can tell me it later. But when you're doing your response, you need to do something there. So if you don't know the second one, you could say, then the professor goes on to explain the second type of motivation, which is the opposite of the first, for example, and leave it there, right? Or say something that you remember. And then the professor goes on to explain the second type of motivation, and does that by giving the example of a child, and you can leave it there. So use whatever you want, whatever you have, whatever you remember, but say something that kind of hides it, you know, that goes for, that shows that you can speak, even if you don't remember exactly what it was, or if you couldn't understand. So
Okay,
just that. Now, carefully in your introduction, remember discusses, not discuss. And everything else was good. I would maybe say, in this case, I think it was necessary to give a short definition of each subtopic. The professor explains intrinsic motivation, which is, tell me a little bit about what it is, so that I can understand better. Because if you go directly to with the example, then I'm gonna be a little bit confused. So describe or define the subtopic just a little, and you'll be great. Okay? Is that okay? Do you have any questions now? Okay. So let's do another one now. Right.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. The professor is discussing advertising strategies.
In advertising, various strategies are used to persuade people to buy products. In order to sell more products, advertisers will often try to make us believe that a product will meet our needs or desires perfectly, even if it's not true. The strategies they use can be subtle, friendly forms of persuasion that are sometimes hard to recognize. In a lot of ads, repetition is a key strategy. Research shows that repeated exposure to a message, even something meaningless or untrue, is enough to make people accept it or see it in a positive light. You've all seen the car commercials on TV, like the one that refers to its roomy cars over and over again. You know which one I mean. This guy is driving around and he keeps stopping to pick up different people. He picks up 3 or 4 people, and each time the narrator says, "Plenty of room for friends, plenty of room for family, plenty of room for everybody." The same message is repeated several times in the course of the commercial. Now the car actually looks kind of small. It's not a very big car at all, but you get the sense that it's pretty spacious. You'd think that the viewer would reach the logical conclusion that the slogan misrepresents the product. Instead, what usually happens is that when the statement "plenty of room" is repeated often enough, people are actually convinced it's true. Another strategy they use is to get a celebrity to advertise a product. It turns out that we're more likely to accept an advertising claim made by somebody famous, a person we admire and find appealing. We tend to think they're trustworthy. So you might have a car commercial that features a well-known race car driver. Now, it may not be a very fast car. It could even be an inexpensive vehicle with a low performance rating. But if a popular race car driver is shown driving it and saying, "I like my cars fast," then people will believe the car is impressive for its speed.
Okay. So, using the examples from the talk, explain how persuasive strategies are used in advertising. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, Alejandro, please. Do you think you can go, Alejandro?
Yes. Okay. The lecture discuss about advertising that many strategies are used to get people to buy products. And the teacher explains about satisfying people's needs. For example, that celebrity advertise products. Then he talks about how we can the products will celebrities. Also, he gives the example of the satisfying for people about the products will the celebrities.
Okay. So, Alejandro, your ideas were a little bit mixed, right? You were mixing the subtopics, mixing the examples. You had no real structure. So you need to work on, I don't know if the problem was that maybe you didn't understand well the lecture, did you? It was about two different strategies, right? Do you remember what the first strategy was? It was repetition, right? So the professor says that there are two different strategies to persuade, that means to convince consumers of buying something. The first one is repetition. So she gives the example of a car commercial, where I think they are repeating constantly the same idea that it's a big car. Plenty of room for friends, plenty of room for family. So they are repeating the same idea so that consumers are convinced. And the second strategy was, as you said, celebrities advertising products. So the professor says that people or consumers are more likely to believe a celebrity. So she also gives another example of a car advertisement too, where there's I don't know, it was a celebrity of some famous racer, I think, that is advertising a car, saying something like that he likes his car fast, right? So we will believe the celebrity that it's a fast car, even though it may be just a normal car. So work on your listening comprehension skills. What you can do maybe is try to listen to different types of academic content at different speeds, with different types of vocabulary, with subtitles, reading the transcript, and you go step by step, right? So you first start listening to the lecture in half the normal speed. You can change the speed in YouTube, right? And then you can try to have the subtitles as well. And that way you're gonna improve your listening comprehension skills and try summarizing those ideas as well. But also remember the structure for this question, right? Remember, you always have two subtopics, two examples. The topic is the question. So in your introduction, you need to use the question. You need to say, the lecture discusses, not discuss, how persuasive strategies are used in advertising. You don't need about either. And then instead of saying the first teacher, use a template, right? First, the professor explains. So try to use the template, follow the structure, and practice your listening. But it was not bad. It was a good start. It was somewhere to get started. But you need to practice a little. Okay, Alejandra, is that okay? Do you guys have any questions now?
Miss,
Okay,
one
thanks.
question. Sorry. We will have the chance to write in a computer, or in the test it's like a blank paper.
Okay, great question, Rosario. And actually, I was gonna tell you that because I saw you were typing, and I was like, I said this yesterday. I don't know if you were in yesterday's class, but in the test, it depends on where you take the test. If you guys take the test at home, you will have to use a whiteboard or a transparent sheet with a mark. So my suggestion yesterday was, if you guys already know where you're gonna take the test, and if you already know that you're gonna take the test at home, then buy yourself the whiteboard or the transparent sheet and start practicing like that. Because in the day of your test, you will take your notes that way, and it's completely different, and it can have an impact on the way that you take your notes. And if you take the test in a test center, you will just write your notes on normal paper with a pen, so you can practice normally, but writing down your notes, right? Not typing. You will never actually have the option of typing your notes. So practice realistically so that you get used to that and it's not a surprise or a problem the day of your test.
Okay, Miss, thanks.
Sure. Any other question? Jose Gal. Are you there? Are you there, Al?
Hi.
Okay. Hey there. So, is your name
Sorry.
Erasmo?
No, Erasmo.
Erasmo, okay, yes.
Sorry.
So,
I don't share my name in that.
okay, and don't forget your camera too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do one more so that you also get to practice because you haven't done anything, right? So let's do one more and you will go.
Listen to part of a talk in an art appreciation class.
In order for art to communicate, to appeal to the emotions or the intellect, it has to combine various visual elements to express meaning or emotion. It's really the visual components of the work, things like color, texture, shape, lines, and how these elements work together that tell us something about the work. Artists combine and manipulate these visual elements to express a message or to create a mood. Think about how a painter might use color, for example. You all know from experience that different colors appeal in different ways to the senses and can convey different meanings. An artist chooses certain colors to evoke a particular mood and make powerful statements. The color red, for example, is a strong color and can conjure up strong emotions, such as extreme joy or excitement or even anger. Blue, on the other hand, is considered a cool color. Blue colors tend to have a calming effect on viewers. Another visual element important to art is texture. By texture, I mean the surface quality or feel of the work, its smoothness or roughness or softness. Now, of course, in some types of art, the texture is physical. It can actually be touched by the fingers. But in painting, for example, texture can be visual. The way an artist paints certain areas of a painting can create the illusion of texture, an object's smoothness or roughness or softness. A rough texture can evoke stronger emotions and strength, while a smooth texture is more calming and less emotional. As I said earlier, artists often combine elements to convey a message about the work. Take a painting that, say, uses a lot of strong colors like reds and oranges and uses brush strokes that are broad, wide sweeping brush strokes that suggest a rough texture. Well, these elements together can convey a wilder, more chaotic emotion in the viewer than in, say, a painting with tiny, smooth brush strokes and soft or pale colors. Artists use these visual effects and the senses they arouse to give meaning to their work.
Now the question says, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the importance of visual elements in painting. Now you'll have 20 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so Erasmo, please, you may start now.
Okay. I think there are a lot of examples and points in this lecture to explain the importance of the visual element in painting. One of the most important visual elements is the color, because the color can express different sense. For example, there are colors that present stronger emotions, and the other, there are colors with emotions, soft emotions and cool emotion, for example. But also, when we are talking about visual elements, we can talk about texture. The texture can give us some ideas of the visual element.
Okay, Erasmo, good. So in terms of content, I can totally see that you got the 2 points. You got the examples as well. So it was good, but I think what you're missing is structure, understanding the structure and using the template. First of all, you can never give your opinion here. So you can say something like, I think the most important one is, we can say, try not to use the first person for anything. So you can say I or we. You're just supposed to act like you were a reporter. So you need to kind of report everything that the professor said. You need to tell me, the professor talks about the importance of visual elements in painting. The first element that the professor mentions is color. He or she explains that color is this and that. The professor gives the example of the blue color versus the red color. So you have to report, right? You can't give your opinion. I
Okay,
would just,
like talking third person.
yes, exactly. Talking about the professor and talking about the lecture, not talking about
Yeah.
yourself.
Okay, thank you.
That's the only thing I'd say. Okay, guys. So any questions before we go?
Yes, Miss. I have one question. Can you show us how you face the instruction? So now a real example that you hear the audio, and what are you typing? I mean, what is the most important for you? The ideas, the most important ideas for you?
For this question, you mean?
For every question, for any.
So you want me to try this question or any other? Okay, yes,
Yes.
of course. Okay, so I'll do this one here. The lecture discusses the importance of visual elements in painting. First, the professor talks about color. Color can express certain emotions according to the professor or evoke certain emotions in the viewer. She gives the example of the blue color and explains that the blue color evokes a calm or peace sense in the viewer. In contrast, the red color, she explains, will evoke stronger emotions such as anger, excitement, or extreme joy. Then she goes on to explain texture, which can be visual or implied texture, the feel of the work. She gives the examples of soft texture that can evoke calm in the viewer, just like the blue color. Furthermore, she also gives the example of rough textures with rough strokes, evoking stronger emotions. So something like that. To be honest, I didn't take notes and I didn't have the template, so I probably didn't use the exact same words as the template. But I had this structure, right? And I tried to say something similar. The important thing is for you to remember the structure, to mention the two different topics, color and texture, and the two examples, right? The blue color, the red color, and soft textures and rough textures and what they evoke. That will be the most important part. And as I said yesterday, right? You should try to have some certain balance. 10 seconds for the introduction, 25 for the first, 25 for the second. That would be an example.
Yes, Miss, but I mean, like, what do you take notes? I want to see how you take notes, because I really don't have a structure to take notes, and I can take notes of everything, but in the moment of speaking, it's really a mess.
Okay. I can show you my notes tomorrow. We can do one to practice and I can show you my notes because now I have to run to my other class. But the way that you should be taking notes is the way we did yesterday. So you should have your notes organized in the exact same way of the elements, right? The topic, which is what you have from the question, subtopic, example, subtopic, and example. So if you want, I can show you, we can do one practice tomorrow and I can show you my notes or the way that I take notes so that you get to see.
Okay. Yes, Miss, thanks.
Okay, guys, any other question? Okay, so please, today we actually have to do 2 surveys. I'm sending you the first, and once you're done with this one, I'll send the other one too. Please don't go yet. You could fill it out for me. I really appreciate that. Okay, thank you so much. I'm sending the other one over too. Okay, guys, and that's gonna be it for today's class. I will see you all tomorrow. We will do one more practice for this question, and then we continue working on what we need to.